In this video, we'll be talking about formatting rows and columns. So let's dive right into it. So in this example here, we've got a very basic table. The first thing that I'm noticing is that in column B, the descriptions of these locations don't fit into column B. Now you'll notice that this whole text here is much longer. It should say North South Australia. These are just made up names. I know it doesn't fit because I can only see north south in here, but in the formula bar I can see the full name. Now it's the same situation with the numbers in this table, and I know that's the case because we've got these little hashtag signs. Now Excel treats numbers and text a little bit differently when they don't fit in the cell. You'll notice that the text is still showing up in part, whereas the numbers are just fully blanked out as hashtags. Now, if you think about why Excel does this, it's actually very important, because what happens if you've got $1 million in there, but you can only see $100,000 in there? Excel is not going to let you accidentally think that there's a lower number in there and then make a decision based on that. Maybe you're going to invest in a company or make a sale or something like that. So it's important that Excel knows that you cannot see the full number. Please expand that column so you don't rely on that incorrect number. Whereas text, it doesn't really matter that much. That's why it's a little bit different. So in this tutorial, we're going to teach you how to change the width and length of the rows and columns. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is approximate column widths and approximate row heights. So how we do that is each of these columns has a little line next to it. Even if you can't see the grid lines at the back, if I turn that off, these headers for the columns and rows, you can still see where that column ends. So what we can do is we can actually just select that and drag it. And as you do that, in real time, it tells you how wide that column is in pixels. So this is how we approximate it. We can just drag it. It's not the most efficient methodology, and it's the same thing with rows as well. And you don't have to just choose one, you can choose multiple rows, select that and drag them, and let's change these to say 25 pixels. So it's a relatively inefficient way of doing it, but it does get the job done. Now we can do the same thing for these columns over here. We're just going to select those three and we're going to drag them. That wasn't enough. And drag them, that was too much, and then drag them back. So that's why it's called an approximated method, is because it's very much guessing. Now let's go through some of the methods you can do to set a precise column width. Now if you know how wide you actually want the column to be, for example, we might have one column that works quite well. What we can do is we can figure out how wide it is, so we can see that it's 23.29. Let's call it 23. We want the other two columns to be that width as well. So what we can do is we can select those two columns, right click, and down the bottom there's column width. We'll just click on that there. And we're going to type in that number that we saw before, so 23. So now all these columns are the exact same width. Let's center that as well. So that is the exact way of formatting the column width, and you can do the same thing for the row height as well. So let's just do that. Let's figure out what row height we like. Let's say this one is okay. So it's about, let's call it 30 pixels. We're going to do these ones as well, and we're going to go for row height, and we're going to go 30 and press OK, and now we've formatted that as well. So the next thing I wanted to show you is auto format. So we're not guessing, we've done that. We're not doing the precise, because that can be difficult if you don't know the precise width. What we're going to do now is if you go over to the home screen on the right hand side under the cells ribbon, there's a little drop down called format. If you choose that drop down, you'll see a few different options where you can change the row height, which is what we did before, just a different way of getting there. But they've also got these really good options, auto fit row height and auto fit column width. So let's go back to how we first opened this, where there was lots of hashtags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that column. I'm going to go to Format and go to Auto Fit Column Width. And Excel will tell me the exact minimum width so I can see that number exactly. You don't have to just choose that one column. You can select multiple columns and do the same thing. So I'm going to go for Format, Auto Fit Column Width, and now almost automatically it's given me the perfect format for these numbers. And we can do the same thing for these rows as well. So we're just going to select these ones. We're going to go to Format. We're going to go to Auto Fit Row Height. So perfect. If that's a little bit too narrow, we can make that a little bit wider as well. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is a shortcut. So instead of having to go to Format, Auto Fit, what we can do is just double click on one of these dividers. So, for example, see how that little two arrows have popped up? I want you to just double click there. And now it's auto-fitted automatically, so you don't have to go through those extra steps of going to there. And we can do it with multiple ones as well, so let's just double click that. It's a little bit slow, and let's do that with our total row as well. There we go. Perfect. The other thing that I can show you here, which is relevant, is what we discussed earlier. So I'll just go through it quickly, which is going into your alignment settings and going shrink to fit. And now, no matter how much you move your column, the numbers will adjust their size so that they can still be visible and not hidden. Okay, so that's the end of adjusting column and row widths and heights. What we're going to be talking about now is how to hide and unhide rows and columns. So, I can see I've got some blank data here. So we've got a few options here. So number one is we can just delete them. So we can select those two rows and right click and delete. And therefore our total is going to be moved up and nice and neat now. The alternative is we can just hide it. So let's hide west side. So we're going to select this row, we're going to right click and we're going to go hide. Now this can be useful for making your workbook a lot cleaner, but it has some downsides. The number one is if there's a hidden row with data in it, formulas such as sums will still be picking up that data. Because if I add up those three numbers there, I'm getting 59 billion, whereas this number is 62 billion. So it's a very easy way to make a mistake. So just be very careful that you're not hiding any information with data in it, because it's summing all four of those numbers. There is a workaround. Instead of the sum formula, we can use the subtotal formula, but that's a little bit too complicated for this course, more of an intermediate course thing to look at. Just keep in mind that yes, it might look good to hide a cell, just make sure that there's no hidden data. Another way we can have a use for hidden cells is if we've got a subtotal. So if you have a series of subtotals, we might want to be hiding the underlying data and only showing the total. So we can see our total group revenue like this. The only issue is, again, going back to the same point, is if we have hidden data, we need to be very careful that we're not accidentally picking that up in formulas. For example, someone might come along and do a sum like this, not realizing that there's data in there, and they're going to get a very big number when they do that. So another workaround from hiding and unhiding, and to unhide, by the way, you right click and press unhide, in the same way you hide the cells. A workaround for all of this to avoid the accidentally missing hidden data issue, there's another feature called grouping. So grouping is very similar to hiding, and you can find it in the data tab all the way over to the right. So what this does is you select the rows that you are going to hide and then you press group. What this does is now the grey bar over here has been shifted over and you've got this little negative sign with a gray line. So what this tells you is these are all the rows that have been grouped, and if you press this little button over here, they disappear just like you were hiding them, except you can now expand them as well, just with a click of a button, like so. So this is a great way of working around it. You can also do it with columns as well, so you can group those over there, and there you go. You might want to add a little text button saying press plus to expand, and then no one is going to miss it, both from this big plus symbol over here, but you can also add text so no one misses it. You'll also see these new little buttons over here now that we've grouped the rows which weren't there before. Basically, you can press these and it'll expand all of them. So if you have multiple groupings like this, and you press 2, it'll expand all of them down there. And if you have multiple of them up this way, you can expand multiple of them by pressing the 2 button as well. Now, one final thing on grouping is you can have multiple levels of grouping. So maybe I just want to group March as well. So now you're going to have 2 levels in there. Maybe group this one and this one. So you're going to have a few levels of grouping. So what this does, it adds an extra 2, 3, 4, and you can tell it basically how many you want to have open at any one time. Okay, and the final thing around grouping is how to remove them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the groupings that I've got up here for the columns, and I'm going to press ungroup and keep pressing it a number of times until all of them have disappeared. Now do the same thing for rows. You select all the rows that have grouping and you press ungroup, and that's it. So that's the end of Unit 12, formatting rows and columns.